to Copilot Podcasts. Oracle reported strong earnings, then sent 10,000 people a 6 a.m. email telling them their jobs were gone, signed simply Oracle Leadership. No names, no explanation. And the company's stock had already dropped 25% that year, not because it was failing, but because investors wanted fewer humans and more AI infrastructure. That's not a warning shot. That's the future arriving ahead of schedule. Today, we're digging into what the last human role automation genuinely cannot replace looks like, what connective labour actually means and why it matters, how automation is reshaping which parts of jobs survive and which vanish, and what skills you need to stay irreplaceable in a world that's actively trying to root around you. My co-host has been deep in the research on this, and I want to start with the most uncomfortably a last human job. Or is that just...
So the honest answer is, it's probably not a job title. It's more like a set of capacities. And the research points pretty clearly toward what those capacities are, even if the picture is messier than most headlines suggest.
Okay, let's back up a little, because I think a lot of people still have this mental model where automation is something that happens to factory workers or truck drivers, not to like lawyers or analysts or marketers.
Yeah, and that mental model is exactly what's getting people caught off guard right now. The TIAA Institute put out a report in 2025 that made this really clear. Unlike previous automation waves, AI is specifically targeting cognitive and non-routine tasks, middle to higher paid professions, knowledge work. That's the thing that's different this time.
So the white-collar safety net is gone.
Pretty much, and you can see it in the layoff numbers. In just the first quarter of 2026, more than 45,000 tech jobs were cut, with AI explicitly cited as the driver in at least 20% of those reductions. Block's CEO Jack Dorsey eliminated 4,000 jobs, about 40% of the company's global workforce, and directly said it was because of the growing capability of AI tools.
And the Oracle situation you mentioned, that was even bigger, right?
Massive. Oracle laid off somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 employees in April 2026. And here's the part that really sticks with me. They did it while reporting strong earnings. TD Cowen analysts estimated those cuts could generate up to $10 billion in savings, and the freed capital was earmarked for AI data center investments. So this wasn't a company in trouble. It was a company making a deliberate bet that fewer humans plus more AI infrastructure equals higher returns.
That's a chilling framing. Companies cutting not because they're struggling, but because they see a future where humans are just optional.
Right. And that's actually what makes the question of the last human job so urgent. It's not hypothetical anymore. The reallocation is happening now, and it's uneven. According to Economic Lens's 2026 analysis, customer service, office support, and media roles face the highest disruption risk because those tasks are repetitive, text-based, or rules-driven. Meanwhile, tech, financial services, and healthcare are accelerating AI adoption, but also generating new roles in data oversight, AI governance, and system integration.
So it's not that jobs are disappearing wholesale, it's more like they're being hollowed out and rebuilt.
Exactly. And that's where a really fascinating piece of research comes in. There's a Johns Hopkins sociologist named Alison Pugh who wrote a book literally called The Last Human Job, and she introduces this concept called connective labor. It's the distinctly human ability to truly see another person and reflect that understanding back to them.
Connective labor. Okay, unpack that for me, because on the surface it sounds almost soft. Like, is she just saying empathy?
It's more precise than empathy. Pugh is describing something specific, the capacity to recognize another person's full humanity in a professional context and respond to it in a way that builds authentic trust. She argues this is what AI currently cannot fully replicate. And she's not being sentimental about it, she's pointing to a structural gap in what AI can do.
But here's where I want to push back a little, because AI is getting really good at mimicking warmth, right? Chatbots that sound caring, customer service bots that apologize convincingly. Isn't that connective labor, kind of?
That's the right challenge to raise. And Pugh's answer, essentially, is that mimicking the surface of connection is not the same as actually seeing someone. There's a difference between a system that outputs empathetic-sounding language and a human who genuinely registers another person's distress and adjusts in real time based on that. The Springer research on AI and creativity makes a similar point. It talks about embodied cognition and emotional depth as things LLMs fundamentally lack.
Embodied cognition, meaning the fact that we have bodies, we've lived experiences, we carry context that shapes how we understand other people.
Exactly. And that's not something you can train a model on because it's not just data, it's the lived accumulation of being a person in the world. That's what makes connective labor so hard to automate.
Okay, so connective labor is one piece, but I want to zoom out a bit because I think there's a more nuanced story here about how automation actually changes jobs, not just which jobs it kills.
Yeah, this is where the MIT research gets really interesting. David Autor, an economist at MIT, did this sweeping study of US occupations and found something that completely upends the standard narrative. Automation doesn't uniformly destroy jobs. It depends entirely on which tasks get automated.
What do you mean by that?
So take bookkeepers and accounting clerks. Between 1980 and 2018, computers took over a huge chunk of their work. Total employment in those roles fell by a third. But, and this is the counterintuitive part, their real hourly wages rose by nearly 40%. Because what was left after automation was the hard stuff, the expert tasks. And fewer people could do those, so the remaining workers became more valuable.
Wait, so losing part of your job to automation can actually make you better paid?
If the right tasks get automated, yes. Neil Thompson, a principal research scientist at the MIT Initiative on the Digital Economy, put it this way. If the thing that gets automated is the easiest task, that leads to a narrowing of the pool of people that do it. But they are paid more. The flip side is inventory clerks. Automation targeted their most expert tasks. Employment more than doubled because the job got easier to enter, and real wages fell by 13%.
So the question isn't just, will my job be automated? It's which part of my job will be automated and what does that leave behind?
That's exactly the frame. And Autor made this really memorable point at a Stanford HAI talk. He said, exposure is not a very useful term. Just because a job is exposed to automation doesn't mean the worker is, quote, hosed. It depends on the structure of the role.
He also used this great example about a crossing guard versus an air traffic controller, right? Both prevent collisions.
Yes, and it's such a sharp illustration. The crossing guard's work is basically untouched by automation. The air traffic controller's tools are increasingly automated to reduce human error. But the controller's role has become more specialized, not less. The automation handles the routine monitoring, the human handles the judgment calls that machines can't make reliably.
And proofreading is another one he mentioned. That one really stuck with me.
Yeah, Autor said, proofreading used to mean spell checking. Now it's about helping people write. The simple task got automated away, and what's left is a much higher order skill. The job didn't disappear, it leveled up.
Okay, I want to bring in something that I think is genuinely underappreciated in this conversation, the creativity angle. Because a lot of people assume that creative work is the last safe harbor. Like, AI can do data entry, but it can't be truly creative.
And that assumption is partially right, but also has a really important caveat. Wharton put out research in 2025 that found ChatGPT does improve the quality of individual ideas. But here's the catch. When groups all use it, they start generating the same ideas. The diversity collapses.
How bad is the collapse?
Pretty striking. In one experiment, people were asked to invent a toy using a fan and a brick. Among those using AI, nearly all suggestions clustered around the same concept. Several participants even independently named their toy Build-A-Breeze Castle. In the human-only group, every single idea was unique. Just 6% of AI-generated ideas were considered unique, compared to 100% in the human group.
That is wild. Build-A-Breeze Castle. Multiple people independently landed on the exact same name.
Because the model is doing what it's designed to do, averaging the most likely completions based on the prompt. Christian Terwiesch, co-director of Wharton's Mac Institute, said it directly. If you rely on ChatGPT as your only creative advisor, you'll soon run out of ideas because they're too similar to each other.
So the more we outsource creativity to AI, the more we all converge on the same outputs. Which means genuine human divergence, the ability to think in a direction nobody else is thinking, becomes incredibly rare and incredibly valuable.
That's a really precise way to put it. And it connects back to what McKinsey's research found. Demand for higher cognitive skills is growing, and creativity specifically is one of the sharpest growth areas. The McKinsey Global Institute found that demand for social and emotional skills like leadership and managing others will rise by 24% by 2030. Technological skills rise by 55%, but basic cognitive skills, data input, processing, decline by 15%.
So the skills that are growing are exactly the ones that are hardest to automate.
Right. And the TIIA Institute's 2025 report adds another layer. 70% of employers now consider analytical thinking the most essential core skill. Not technical execution, analytical thinking. The ability to make sense of complex, ambiguous situations.
Which brings us back to this idea from Harvard Business Publishing that I found really compelling. Leaders are shifting from being decision makers to being sense makers.
Yeah, that framing from Mark Marone's piece in Harvard Business Impact Insights is really useful. The argument is that as AI handles more of the execution and even some of the decision making, the distinctly human role becomes orchestrating the interaction between humans and AI systems, reading complexity, navigating ambiguity, knowing when to trust the machine and when to override it.
And that's not a skill you can just download. That's built through experience and judgment.
Exactly. And the Harvard research found that in their 2025 Global Leadership Development Study, predicting the nonlinear evolution of roles was identified by global leaders as one of the three most urgent objectives. Because job responsibilities aren't just shifting, they're fragmenting, fusing, and sometimes disappearing altogether in ways that are genuinely hard to predict.
Non-linear evolution of roles. That's a phrase that should probably terrify anyone who's been coasting on a stable job description for the last 5 years.
It should prompt action, at least. The TIAA report found that 59% of the workforce will need new skills by 2030, but nearly half of employees report inadequate AI training support from their employers. So there's this massive gap between what's needed and what's being provided.
And that gap is where people get left behind.
Precisely. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs framework, cited in the Economic Lens 2026 analysis, makes the point that AI adoption tends to expand demand for analytical and digital roles rather than eliminate employment outright. But that only helps you if you're positioned to move into those roles. If you're not, the reallocation happens without you.
Let me bring in the nursing example here because I think it's a really concrete illustration of what this looks like in practice.
Yeah, it's a great one. According to the Science Array analysis of automation-resistant careers, 68% of core nursing skills resist automation: patient care, empathy, physical presence. But administrative functions like medical coding are rapidly becoming AI-assisted. So the job doesn't vanish, it evolves. Nurses spend less time on paperwork and more time on the human connection that defines healthcare.
Which is actually what most nurses went into the profession to do in the first place.
Right. And that's a version of the bookkeeper story. Automation removes the simpler tasks. What remains is more human, more expert, and arguably more meaningful. The question is whether that pattern holds across enough roles to be reassuring, or whether it's the exception.
And I think that's where the honest answer gets uncomfortable, because the Science Array analysis also cites a Wharton projection that AI could automate up to 40% of current labor income worldwide by 2030. That's not a small number.
It's not. And the same analysis notes that while 85 million jobs may vanish by the end of the decade, the same forces are projected to create 170 million new positions, a net gain of 78 million roles. But the catch is that those new roles require skills that a lot of current workers don't have yet.
So the net number looks okay on paper, but the transition is where people actually get hurt.
That's the crux of it. And the Indeed 2025 Gen AI Skill Transformation Index found that 46% of skills in a typical job posting will undergo hybrid transformation. AI assists, humans decide. Another 40% show minimal transformation, remaining firmly in human hands. So the picture is actually more nuanced than the apocalyptic headlines suggest.
Only 1% of current US jobs face complete automation, according to that same analysis, which is a number I did not expect.
Yeah, it reframes the whole conversation. It's not about jobs disappearing wholesale, it's about jobs transforming. And the people who navigate that transformation well are the ones who understand which parts of their work are genuinely irreplaceable.
Let me ask you something that I think a lot of people in their mid-20s are sitting with right now. If you're early in your career, what does this actually mean for how you think about building skills?
I think the honest answer is stop thinking about job titles and start thinking about task portfolios. The MIT research is really clear that the question isn't, is my job exposed to automation, but which tasks in my job are exposed and what does that leave behind? If what's left is more expert, more human, more relational, you're probably okay. If what's left is easier for anyone to do, that's a problem.
And the skills that seem to be genuinely durable, connective labor, sense-making, creative divergence, Those aren't things you build by taking an online course. They're built through practice and through being in rooms with other humans.
Exactly. And that's actually a hopeful framing, even if it's demanding. The McKinsey research found that demand for social and emotional skills, leadership, managing others, is rising by 24% by 2030. Those skills are built through experience, through relationships, through navigating complexity with other people. That's not something you can shortcut.
There's also something interesting in the Harvard Business Publishing piece about how organizations themselves need to change, not just individual workers.
Yeah, the research found that 44% of organizations are placing greater emphasis on upskilling and reskilling within leadership development, and 45% said expectations are rising for leaders to actively support their team's AI upskilling. So the burden isn't just on individuals. Organizations that don't invest in this are going to fall behind.
And almost 20% of companies in the McKinsey survey said their executive team lacks sufficient knowledge to lead AI adoption, which is a pretty alarming number when you think about who's supposed to be steering the ship.
It is. And almost 1 in 3 firms said they're concerned that lacking the skills they need for automation adoption will hurt their future financial performance. So this isn't just a worker problem, it's a leadership problem. The sense-making role that Harvard describes isn't just for frontline employees, it's for the people at the top too.
I want to come back to something Pew said because I think it's the most important thread in all of this. She argues that as AI automates more human-centered tasks, we risk degrading meaningful interpersonal connections in professional environments. And that's not just a philosophical concern, it has real consequences for service quality.
Right. And she's pointing to something that's easy to miss in the efficiency conversation. When you automate the human touchpoints in healthcare, counseling, education, legal services, you might be gaining speed and cutting costs, but you're potentially losing the thing that makes those services actually work. A patient who doesn't feel seen by their doctor is less likely to follow treatment. A student who doesn't feel understood by their teacher is less likely to learn.
So connective labor isn't just a nice to have, it's load-bearing.
That's a great way to put it. It's structurally necessary for outcomes in a whole range of fields. And that's why Pew argues it's the last human job, not because it's the only thing left, but because it's the thing that holds everything else together.
And the Wharton creativity research adds another dimension to this, because if AI is flattening creative diversity, then the humans who can genuinely think differently, who can bring a perspective that no model would average toward, those people become extraordinarily valuable.
Terwesh's warning is worth sitting with. If you rely on ChatGPT as your only creative advisor, you'll soon run out of ideas because they're too similar to each other. That's not an argument against using AI, it's an argument for maintaining and developing your own capacity to think divergently even as you use these tools.
Use the tool, but don't become the tool.
Exactly. And I think that's actually the most actionable takeaway from all of this research. The people who will thrive aren't the ones who resist AI or the ones who fully outsource their thinking to it. It's the ones who use it strategically while preserving the distinctly human capacities that AI can't replicate.
So when you step back from everything we've covered today, the Oracle layoffs, the MIT wage research, Pew's connective labor, the Wharton creativity findings, what's the through line?
The through line is that the last human job isn't a single role, it's a cluster of capacities that are genuinely hard to automate. The ability to truly see another person and respond to them. The ability to think in directions that no model would average toward. The ability to make sense of complexity and ambiguity in real time. Those aren't soft skills. They're the hardest skills. And they're becoming more valuable, not less, precisely because everything around them is being automated.
And the data backs that up. Demand for social and emotional skills rising 24%. Analytical thinking cited as critical by 70% of employers. Creative divergence becoming the scarcest output in an AI-saturated world.
And the transition is real, and it's hard. 59% of the workforce needing new skills by 2030, with nearly half reporting inadequate support from their employers. That's a gap that's going to hurt a lot of people if it doesn't get addressed. The net job numbers might look okay on paper, but the path from here to there is genuinely difficult for a lot of workers.
So the question isn't really, will I have a job? It's, am I building the kind of human that automation needs to work alongside rather than replace?
That's the frame, and it's actually an empowering one, even if it's demanding. Because those capacities, connection, divergent thinking, sense-making, are things humans can develop. They're not fixed. They're built through practice, through relationships, through choosing to stay in the hard conversations instead of outsourcing them to a chatbot.
Here's what this really comes down to. Oracle sent 10,000 people a 6 a.m. email and called it organizational change. But the research we've been through today suggests that the humans who are hardest to replace aren't the ones who are most efficient at their tasks. They're the ones who are most genuinely present with other humans. The ones who could see people, think differently, and navigate complexity that no model can average its way through. That's not a consolation prize. That's the actual competitive advantage.
And the beautiful irony is that the more AI we deploy, the more valuable those human capacities become. Every task that gets automated raises the premium on the tasks that can't be. So, in a weird way, the rise of AI is the best argument for investing in your most human skills.
So here's your takeaway from today. Figure out which parts of your work require you to genuinely see another person, think in a direction nobody else is thinking, or make sense of something that doesn't have a clean answer. Protect those parts. Develop those parts. Because that's where the last human job lives. Not in a title, not in a department, but in the moments that no model can average its way into. Thanks for being here on Copilot Podcasts. And next time you get a 6 a.m. email from leadership, maybe check if it was written by a human.